Story 1. Trump just said Americans will die, and that usually happens in a war. So, there's that.
Some of you may die, but that is a sacrifice that I am willing to make.
Our president will start a war with Iran because he has absolutely no ability to negotiate. He's weak and he's ineffective. Donald Trump.
To Trump, they're just suckers and losers, so he could care less. Wonder how many coffins he'll ignore?
Story 2. Realistically, limited strikes back and forth for a few weeks. Then both sides claim victory and de-escalate. No full war, too costly for everyone. The US would push hard to stop it. Iran will scream loud but won't risk total destruction.
With head negotiators like Check Notes, Trump's son-in-law. I'm shocked that this isn't going well.
Yeah, this. Netanyahu wants to look like he's doing something and stay in power. Trump wants to distract from the Trump-Epstein files. Iran has to look like it's defending itself. My taxes will pay for all of these bombs.
Did the Ayatollah not offer to build a Trump golf course in Tehran? That would usually placate pretty much anything.
Story 3. If they manage regime change in the area, it will be overthrown by a reactionary regime. This keeps happening over and over and over again, and nobody in power ever listens to history. It's how the current regime in Iran happened in the first place.
Well, whatever regime brought about this will also be a reactionary regime. Realistically, someone willing to kowtow to American imperialism.
Story 4. People die, defense industry stocks rise, and still no one who had ties with Epstein has been arrested. Story 5. My family says everyone in Iran is celebrating because this is their best chance of regime change in generations. Meanwhile, the comments from people thousands of miles away are doom and gloom.
Good thing the United States is historically always really good and responsible when it does a regime change. And this time we have our genocidal vassal state involved. Surely this goes well for the Iranian people in the long run.
There are videos of Iranians dancing in the streets after the attacks. I'm not Iranian. I have no dog in this fight. But the Iranian public seems happy that Israel and the United States are doing this.
There are thousands of Iranian expatriates in my community, and they're hoping that regime change is coming. They're obviously worried about their loved ones back in Iran, but this regime has been terrible for them, and the last few months have been brutal for the Iranian people. Things just kept getting worse there. Ironically, they see similarities between the United States, which they're relying on for regime change, and the current regime in Iran. When we talk about the political situation in the United States, they say they've seen this before, and it only gets worse.
Story 6. Reading these answers makes me so concerned for the dumbfuck Americans who have no idea what their country is actively involved in.
People also seem to forget that Iran launched a massive missile attack on Israel in 2025 that indiscriminately targeted civilian areas. No conflict between Israel and Iran is unprovoked. The two countries have been in open conflict for decades. Iran also funds Hamas and other proxy terrorist groups who regularly attack Israel. I can't say I'm surprised, though. During the Israel-Iran conflict last year, people had already forgotten that Iran launched a similar missile attack in 2024.
The problem with your argument about us directly interfering is that the proxies you named will directly enter the conflict. The Suez Canal will be shut down, as well as the Straits of Hormuz. I'm guessing you haven't got an iota of understanding of how global trade works, or else you'd understand how bad that is. More importantly, Iran has just signed a new strategic alliance with China and Russia on the 29th of January. It realigns lines of defense cooperation. BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa doesn't have a mutual defense charter like NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, but it does provide a path for material, weapon support. This also leaves out the fact that host nations where our bases are located that have been hit will get a vote on which side they want to be on. So, in conclusion, you, sir or ma'am, have no clue what you're talking about. This has just begun, and will get much, much worse before it gets better. Add to the equation that our president has the diplomacy of a Mr. Potato Head, so buckle in because this is GWOD 2.0, the Global War on Terror, version 2.0.
I hate Trump, but holy shit, Most people here are wannabe moral angels who don't know how geopolitics works. The Iranian people want to be liberated from the Islamic regime's tyranny. If this is going to topple the current government, then why not? Israel already has controversies in how they handle Gaza, but in this case, they are less evil than Iran. Did Israel fund any terrorist organizations? Israel has done some questionable things in Gaza, but in geopolitics, they're much better. While Iran is actively funding Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis in Yemen, causing stagnation and chaos in those countries. The problem with leftists is they don't know how to compromise and are not flexible. This is why they are not popular in the mainstream population, and that's the hard pill to swallow for you.
Story 7. Trump will drop a few bombs, claim victory, and Iran will continue with their nuclear weapons program in secret.
It'll be over by Monday, and nothing of substance will have been achieved. $5 says the Ayatollah survives. Trump rapes kids.
Story 8. What exactly is the United States and Israel's game here? It seems doubtful that airstrikes can entirely destroy Iran's nuclear weapon development capability or topple the Iranian regime. Iran will just move or disperse its plutonium enrichment facilities. Bombing might help nudge a teetering government out of power, but it seems there's no credible opposition in Iran that's pushing the regime toward falling. Update. As part of an announcement about the United States and Israel strikes on Iran, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu just said this: "The time has come for all segments of the Iranian people, the Persians, the Kurds, the Azeris, the Baluchis, and the Awazis, to throw off the yoke of tyranny and bring about a free and peaceful Iran." So, are they actually serious about regime change this time?
Is that a Christian evangelical thing? I think some Bible thumpers believe that Jews need to guard Israel for them, so that Christ can come on Judgment Day and save all the Christians or something.
Yes, a split in the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps would certainly hasten the overthrow, and so we should expect the Israelis to continue targeting the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. I think you're incorrect about the Artesh, Iran's regular army. They would merely need to refuse to suppress. It will take years. We're still in the strategic weakening stage, but that's the ultimate purpose of these strikes. Now Iran's air capabilities have been crippled. I'm sorry, this will come off as arrogant and cuntish, but it sounds like you're not familiar with the situation on the ground.
There's no way there's going to be a successful overthrow of the regime without the following. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps changes sides or stays in its barracks. The regular army and police change sides. There are large enough parts of the country that rebels can secure in the U.S. And Israel provide rebels in those areas with supplies, arms, and intelligence.
Story 9. The Middle East will erupt into chaos, and we will be stuck in the quagmire for a generation unless someone drops nukes and ends us all. Meanwhile, the right wing will have forgotten all about the Epstein files, just as planned. Story 10. As an Iranian, I hope for the end of the regime that has brutalized my people for close to 50 years. Story 11. Innocent people will die for no good reason, just so the rich can become even wealthier and influence the world further. The United States is yet again meddling in foreign affairs they have no place nor right to intervene in. Story 12. People in the Middle East will die. But it's okay. Our lives are cheap. We are savages and barbaric, and we deserve to die. That's why it's okay that the USA keeps waging wars and killing us. Story 13. Let's be honest. Israel's and the United States bombing of Iran justifies the rhetoric of the Iranian government that foreign powers are trying to overthrow their government, instead of the reality that the people want regime change.
Yeah, I think this is true, and it's definitely not ideal. That's why I don't like there being a war, besides the potential loss of lives. Unfortunately, I also think Trump negotiated himself into a corner. You can only say, make the deal, or I'll bomb you so many times. B. The Iranians were unable to topple the regime by themselves, and we're asking for help.
Story 14. The politicians and their families will be just fine. The idiots of America, half the country to be honest, will be happy, and they'll actively root for this. Then in 10 years, they'll say they made a mistake. I'll clarify, I only think this gets to that point if they put boots on the ground. But I have no idea. It depends on whether Iran really wants total war. We'll see how they retaliate in the morning, but this could go on for a while.
Then, in 10 years, they'll say they made a mistake. Incorrect. They'll say they never supported it.
They'll say Israel manipulated Trump into a disastrous war.
Conveniently, not a single member of Congress had to vote for this. They will be able to say whatever they want, and Trump will long be dead.
Story 15. Realistically, here's my guess. Iran falls. Hopefully quickly, but it falls regardless. There's no love lost between the Persians and the Arabs. They lack local allies. They may have strategic allies like Russia, but this wouldn't be a proxy war, so it's unlikely to happen immediately, if at all. Without Iran's backing, Hamas is crippled as a military and political power. The Arab states make peace with Israel out of economic necessity to sell oil and gas. Whatever resistance there is internally is overwhelmed by the most powerful and pro-Western states. Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Qatar. Israel expands, likely under the auspices of keeping the peace and defending themselves. Hotspots show up, but with the most sophisticated intelligence system on Earth, Mossad, CIA, Five Eyes, ANZUS, and so on, and ruthless internal security from Shin Bet and the IDF, they keep the status quo at the barrel of a gun backed by the US dollar. Story 16. Everyone collectively realizing how pointless it is, then going back to arguing about Taylor Swift on Twitter. Story 17. Unfortunately, not the complete destruction of either Israel or Iran's regime. When everything is over, the rest of the world will still have to deal with these motherfuckers and the death and damage they cause. Story 18. This is to provide pretext for a U.S. assault when the Iranians retaliate against Israel. A lot of people are about to die. I believe the objective is to topple the Iranian regime, possibly with a decapitation strike. What happens after is anyone's guess. I suspect the U.S. will not invade and occupy, meaning Iran is likely to collapse into regional control. Whether there is an overarching strategy to this is unclear to me. There was an argument to be made that the assault on Venezuela was to limit Chinese influence in South America and provide a hollow political victory to appease conservative Cuban and Venezuelan constituencies in the U.S. Additionally, by toppling the Venezuelan communists and restoring democratic governance to Venezuela, Trump can end the asylum of the Venezuelans and send them back home, deport them, without suffering for it politically among the Cuban conservatives and their allies. If this is to be a broader pattern, then I'd say it looks somewhat like the objective may be to clear the board of regional conflicts which could serve as distractions from a conflict with China. Though in such a case, I'd expect the U.S. to stop seeking resolution at all, or at least on Russian terms in Ukraine, which recent actions are not incompatible with. Story 19. Israel continues their program of assassinating key technologists and selective bombing. Iran steps up their support for any group that opposes Israel and throws in a public event every so often. Neither country can do serious damage to each other, but Israel has nukes. Bruh, what do you think would happen if Israel used one? So this is yet another turban for Kippa back and forth. It would not surprise me if Russia opened up the armory for Iran. Story 20. Trump even said Americans are likely to die, but that is a sacrifice he is willing to make.
Brave Captain Bone Spurs, always willing to sacrifice other people's children. Send Barron to the front lines first.
Story 21. Iran gets its shit kicked in. Some people die. Israel and the United States suffer no notable damage. Story 22. Most realistic outcomes. Lots of war, political instability, economic instability, and of course death. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is evil. Look what they do to their own citizens, not to mention what their proxies do elsewhere. But based on past U.S. interventions in the Middle East, I don't have faith that military intervention will make things better. The hypocrisy of the current U.S. administration pretending they care about women is not lost on me either. As an indirect outcome, I think there will be a lot more violence toward Jews worldwide. Probably toward the Iranian diaspora too, no matter who they support. I truly hope and pray for what I see as less realistic outcomes. I would be extremely happy to take a loss on any of these predictions. Story 23. How many times do we have to go through this before people recognize the pattern? Iran will get bombed for a while. They will shake their fists and swear retaliation before quietly standing down. Trump will tweet mission accomplished. Repeat after 12 to 18 months. It's obviously sad that it happens at all, and I'd rather we never get involved, but it will never lead to anything. Story 24. I'm not a big fan of Iran and its regime, but at the same time, Trump and Bibi need to be taught a lesson. I hope they will resist. You can't just go to war when you see fit. Story 25. Iran will vow revenge but get pummeled. Hopefully, the Iranian government is overthrown. Story 26. Several years of United States posturing. Likely a bunch more war crimes in the interest of keeping Western democracy alive, fighting terrorism, all while the elites further enrich themselves off of weapons deals and the plebs go to war and die, or something. Story 27. Ayatollah dies. Missiles hit most states in the Middle East. The Revolutionary Guard consolidates power. Not enough people for real regime change or a ground war, so dead people without much to show for it. And the parasites that are the Revolutionary Guard gain more power and continue to extract wealth from the Iranian people. Top-level leadership changes to some other radical who spouts the same bullshit. A peace treaty pretty quickly, with likely the same nuclear concessions that were on the table originally. No one benefits from a prolonged conflict, but with Trump, you never know. Still, if a popular uprising follows, maybe the Revolutionary Guard will help facilitate a governmental shift, solidifying their stolen wealth while backing out of power and responsibility. Israel will obviously do whatever they can to gain internal influence, money, desalination plants, and so on. And Trump, well, he knows nothing of soft power, so even a relatively okay outcome for Iran, comparatively speaking, can't really benefit the US. Even if the leader in exile gets into power, he's unlikely to throw Iran under the bus for the US. He'd just make friends with Israel, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia, join the global economy, and push through some political and economic reforms, ideally if he's not secretly some psycho-tyrant. Actually, none of this benefits the US at all. Iran is a geopolitical rival, but all we have to do is protect our allies from them to get our biggest gains. Attacking them is a huge resource sink that can only harm us economically. Story 28. Probably just a few exchange strikes, then a ceasefire. I wish the Ayatollahs would go BRRR and unleash all their missiles on Israel and US ships. Story 29. Apparently, Iran has been weeks away from developing a nuclear weapon since 1995. Story 30. Islam and death are down, freedom and life are up. Maybe, with time, we won't need to go through an hour of security checks in airports. Story 31. If the Ayatollah, the clerics, and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps top brass are all taken out, and no immediate, credible, Western-approved replacement that also has the support of at least a modest percentage of the population steps in to restore order. Total pandemonium. Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps factions led by whatever commanders are left, taking orders from themselves and possibly fighting each other for dominance, while United States and Israeli forces try to put them down. Kurdish and Baloch militias and other small religious extremist groups pop up and start madly scrambling to establish their own independent territories. The Kurds and Baloch are most likely to fight to carve out specific regions of influence for themselves. The religious factions will probably try to take the country to create their own vision of an Islamic republic according to their specific interpretation of some obscure hadiths. They will most likely end up fighting each other first, which will be brutal and bloody. In all cases, tens of millions of people are going to try to flee, at first through Turkey and Armenia, then Georgia, and depending on how the Iraqi border guards are feeling, they may pass through Iraq on their way to Lebanon and Syria, and from there onto the Mediterranean and to whichever European country will let them in. A suitable leader being planted in and restoring order, undoing the worst of the regime's corruption and repressions, and stabilizing the situation by calling for lots of Western investment to pull Iran out of its domestic crises would be a best-case scenario that ends in minimal bloodshed. But realistically, that is a low chance. Iran is not Venezuela. It's almost certainly going to be a total shit show. Best of luck to everyone down there right now. Stay safe and cover your windows. Story 32. I don't know, man. It depends on how serious Trump is. Israel can't topple the government alone. America most certainly can, but it depends on whether they really want to. A lot of recent global conflicts have been pretty small-scale and short affairs. If America really does go through with it, I would imagine an American victory and regime change to be the most likely. But the public outcry in America would be colossal. Story 33. Israel will eventually fall, and its architects will be hunted down and prosecuted for war crimes and genocide. Story 34. Great question. No one knows. Here's a live video of Iranian people celebrating. Story 35. Innocent bystanders die, and oil prices go up. Everything else stays the same in the end. Story 36. Serious Israel will get exactly what it wants because it controls the United States government through blackmailing and buying American politicians. Story 37. From The Onion. Netanyahu calls Iran strikes necessary to prevent the war he just started. Story 38. A full-blown war across the entire Middle East, instigated by the United States. No midterms, no charges on the Epstein files. Story 39. I think a war propagated by Israel is not a good look. It may help the regime legitimize itself and get more entrenched. The United States doesn't care about protesters. Story 40. Tens of thousands of dead protesters. Analysts disagree on what the piles of rubble mean. Back to square one. Story 41. Hopefully, they're able to disable the current regime and then let the people of Iran take their government back, as they've been wanting to for decades.
Somehow the Revolutionary Guard will just be cool with it? The guys who have sponsored insurgents everywhere outside Iran. They are making the same mistake as in Iraq and Afghanistan, going into a region without understanding the end result.
Story 42. The U.S. will reinstall the Shah. Israel continues to genocide Palestinians. A lot of people will be dead. Same as usual. Story 43. One of the most likely outcomes is that the American people will be distracted from the Federal Bureau of Investigation and Department of Justice hiding evidence of Trump being a child rapist. The lives of dark-skinned people on the other side of the world are a small price to pay. Story 44. Israel would know all of Iran's military installations. Iran would fire a lot of missiles into populated areas like Tel Aviv. Iron Dome can only do so much, and some will get through. Lives will be lost. Story 45. Hopefully, for the people of Iran, regime change and more long-term stability in the region. Story 46. Hopeful, assuming Iranians don't fight it, hopefully the fall of the fundamentalist theocracy.
This is not a way to enforce regime change. Also, the last time the United States intervened in Iran, it did not work out in the long term.
It never works that way. War is how we get people like this in power in the first place.
Story 47. Innocent people will die. Israel will take far more missile damage than they admit to and beg the United States to get them a ceasefire. Exactly the same as last time. Story 48. Less fundamentalism in the world. Freedom of expression for women and homosexuals in Iran.
Plus another 30,000 dead in Iran. Another few thousand dead in Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq. Less world focus on the Pakistan and Afghanistan war. Oh, and higher prices for everything. Win-win for the Epstein class.
Story 49. I'm personally hoping it eases the pressure off Ukraine. Iran supplies Putin with missiles, drones, and probably lots more. For Iran, difficult to say. Regime change can be very difficult to implement. Afghanistan didn't work, Iraq didn't really work, Syria didn't really work. Presumably many others as well. Similar to cartels, it seems. Behead the snake and another head or even heads will grow. The scale of commitment you have to achieve it is huge. However, I think it's reasonable to assume some benefits. The Houthis no longer bomb Israel. The sea and commerce are made safer. Maybe, just maybe, Iran's people will rise and enter the 21st century. Maybe terrorism and the Taliban will become more isolated and perhaps easier to remove long-term. Might be others as well. A lot just depends on the scale of commitment and how far they will go. Story 50. Iran gets bombed a bit. Then the United States and the Israeli Defense Forces will declare mission accomplished and nothing changes. Neither of them actually wants to get rid of Iran. It is a nice boogeyman. Story 51. This is not good for humanity. Many innocent people will die for politics and power. Story 52. Iran surrenders. The United States has another puppet ready to take over. The United States gets more oil. More importantly, the United States controls lots of oil and China does not, making the United States stronger in any United States-China tensions and deals. Story 53. A lot of Muppets in suits will repeat. Israel has the right to defend itself, while knowing that Israel is the aggressor. Story 54. A lot of the senior leadership in Iran will be killed and Israel, maybe with American help, will destroy whatever they want. Iran will send some missiles and drones at Israel and American bases, which are unlikely to do any serious damage. Story 55. Iran throws some missiles back. Israel shoots most of them down. People get up in arms about a breach of the peace. Then, on Taco Tuesday, Trump chickens out and Iran goes back to the negotiating table. We forget that this happened, much like we forgot what happened in Venezuela. And Trump will use this as evidence that he deserves a peace prize. Story 56. We would see how well modern aircraft carriers handle swarms of hypersonic anti-ship missiles. Story 57. There'll be a war that will eventually stop, and Trump will claim credit and whinge when he doesn't get the Nobel Peace Prize. Story 58. There's no way the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps lays down, which means there's no way a single U.S. or Israeli boot steps into Iran unless the IRGC deposes Khamenei and invites them. Gonna be some back-and-forth strikes, and the dotard will say he's obliterated something else in a week or less. Story 59. Some people will die, some will miss them, some will swear revenge. Never ends. Story 60. Just so people are aware of how nuanced it is, Iran has a sizable Jewish population that is at risk in this conflict from both sides. I hope steps are taken for their protection. Story 61. Nothing really. Iran absolutely cannot fight a war against Israel, let alone the United States. They will do some minor retaliation strikes and then quickly come to a ceasefire agreement. Story 62. The Iranian government gets toppled, and the new president is most likely Jewish or very supportive of Israel. Story 63. Same as always. A lot of people suffering, dead, environmental damage, economic damage for everyone, etc. And billionaires getting even richer. The same reason anything happens. Story 64. They're probably just going to send missiles at each other for a few days at most, and that's all. Story 65. Trump backing out of this like he tends to do with promises, leaving Israel alone in a head-on war against Iran. Story 66. Trump's existential threat will disappear from the headlines. Remember his ubiquity in the Epstein files? Slight chuckle. I didn't think so. Story 67. Maybe an extended strike campaign. Iran will lob missiles and drones at Israel and U.S. bases. By the end of it, it's unlikely the Iranian regime is ousted. Even if they kill the leadership and the people who would be their successors, that regime's survival is not dependent on these leaders surviving. The U.S. and Israel aren't about to do a ground invasion. Story 68. The United States is guaranteed to win the battlefield duels and dramatic military operations, but it won't perform anything else very well. Libya, Afghanistan, and Iraq have consistently and repeatedly proven the United States is strategically incompetent. If the Islamic Republic of Iran collapses, then I would imagine another Libya. The United States doesn't have a post-war plan besides vague military and political objectives of nation-building, counterterrorism, and establishing democracy. It's an endless commitment without a viable end state, no metrics, no benchmarks, and no political end states. Story 69. Considering they already beat them in 1967, I can't see any different outcome in 2026 unless Iran has nukes. Then we're all fucked. I can see the rest of the Arab world getting very nervous, seeing as they went back on a deal they made with Israel in 1967, and now it seems the debt collector is coming to claim what's due. Story 70. Lots of Iranians die. Trump declares total victory unilaterally and preemptively without actually achieving anything. The Iranian people hate their government, but this bolsters the Iranian regime to limp on at least a little while longer. And we probably do it again next year. Story 71. The same thing that's been going on in the Middle East for the past 500 years. It will cool down and then pick back up again later. Story 72. I would presume it's to install the Shah's son into a puppet regime in the pay of Israel. Hold elections and hope to get the right result. America gets its oil. How this will sit with the Iranian people is anyone's guess. Story 73. Israel will justify this by bumping up the payments to our bought and paid for Congress. Story 74. Pedophiles in the United States will continue to make a killing off their stock holdings, both literally and figuratively. Story 75. The ideal outcome would be ending the Iranian regime and the start of a new democratic Iranian republic. The likely outcome is the destruction of the Iranian military, civilian casualties, and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps cementing its grip over Iranian society. Story 76. The rebuilding of the Third Temple, which will bring about or coincide with a Titan spirit, an Anunnaki or fallen angel, the eschatological Antichrist on earth in the form of a man. All of the spirits from the pit will be rushing like horses into war, and finally there won't be a good spirit left amongst men. Story 77. The Ayatollah folds. Puppet is installed. BRICS dies and the petrodollar lives on. Story 78. I grew up in a small town where everyone thought the same. I moved to a city at age 22 and realized the world is way more complicated than I was taught. Story 79. Western tourists will get off the bus and stop for an hour in Isfahan. Then they will travel by bus to the Trump Tower Golf Resort, where there are reproductions of the other tourist sites. Story 80. A massive increase in posts like, "What do you think of?" followed by the topical news item of the day. Story 81. Sell gold now. Buy again when it settles down in about 8 days. By the way, it's mostly the United States and a bit of Israel, not the other way around, and to remove an Islamist dictator who recently slaughtered over 30,000 people. The outcome will be that the old regime will be replaced by a democracy or a moderate Islamic regime that is less insane. Story 82. Democracy for the Iranian people and an end to a tyrannical theocratic regime. Is that not enough for you, who live peacefully in a country where rights are granted to your women so that they can avoid suffering too much from their menstrual cycle? Story 83. Hopefully, Iran retaliates, and we will watch with popcorn. Chuckles. Just Americans and Israelis doing American and Israeli stuff. Story 84. They just killed 5 little girls in Iran because America and Israel decided to hit an elementary school. What is this life? How are they the targets? Fuck them. Story 85. Negotiations, then a ceasefire, then attack again, renegotiate again, ceasefire again. It's just going to keep repeating itself until further notice. Not sure why people suddenly feel this is different from any other times they've struck Iran. Story 86. Well, the Epstein files get ignored, and American common folk have something to chew on. Story 87. The global economy will collapse. Oil prices will surge as the Strait of Hormuz is heavily affected. Story 88. Today's Israeli strike on Iran is just another episode in a long chain of regional escalation. It's not a signal for a full-scale war like in Ukraine. No one is ready to risk that. For a week, maybe a month, there will be missiles, media hype, and exchanges of statements, then it will all quiet down. These are tactical moves and shows of force, not a strategic war. Story 89. I hope I'm wrong, but this time, it'll escalate. It'll escalate to the point of U.S. troops on the ground. Already, Iran has attacked Israel, the UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, I guess. Also, remember, like last time, the U.S. and Israel attacked when talks were ongoing. Zero trust in Americans this time, in their intentions, or in their ability to control Israel. Does anyone here remember the Iran-Iraq War? Story 90. 2 ministers already dead, so something might actually happen this time. It all really depends on whether Khamenei is dead or not. Story 91. The United States and Israel just struck Iran. Let's be honest about this. Without Trump, this doesn't happen. Story 92. I don't see this ending without regime collapse in Iran. They haven't been able to rebuild their capabilities since the 12-day war last year. They were significantly outclassed by Israel in that war, plus with United States munitions support. And now the United States seemingly has positioned itself as a full participant, with Trump effectively calling for an end to the regime. That said, I do not think the regime will collapse peacefully unless those closest to Khamenei turn him over to the Iranian people or kill him themselves, and many Iranian civilians die at the hands of Khamenei. If the United States doesn't get involved in nation building and regime change, only focusing on degrading and eliminating the regime itself, I have no doubt that the region is going to be extremely unstable due to the inevitable power vacuum that remains. Story 93. People will die. Beyond that, who knows? Iran may concede to some demands in private. I know they are pushing for a regime change. Normally not a good idea, but Iran is the biggest sponsor of terrorism, and the Iranian people deserve better. Hopefully not too much collateral damage on all sides. Story 94. Masses of civilians will forget their anger towards their corrupt or despotic overlords and unite behind them against the common enemy. Masses of civilians will forget their anger towards their corrupt or despotic overlords and unite behind them against the common enemy. Masses of civilians will forget their anger towards their corrupt or despotic overlords and unite behind them against the common enemy. Story 95. The outcome? A lot of tough talk and a lot of civilian anxiety, followed by a return to the status quo. Both regimes need an external enemy to keep their domestic populations distracted. They'll trade blows until both sides can claim a win to their own people. Then they'll go back to the shadow war. It's a cycle as old as time. Story 96. It depends on whether the United States is as powerful as they portray themselves, and if Iran is as weak as it is portrayed in the media. Story 97. Serious, if the United States and Israel cannot chop the head off the dragon in the first 48 hours with aerial assault and special forces, this will turn into a ground war and, in turn, guerrilla warfare. That's why Trump is pleading with the Iranian people to overthrow their own government, because without that, it will become a long, costly conflict, expensive with loss of American lives that Trump cannot afford. But he's willing to risk it all because of the Epstein files and Israeli blackmail. Story 98. People will die, people will migrate to other countries, weapons manufacturers will get richer. And rather annoyingly for the fat orange one, no one will forget about the Epstein files. Story 99. Flights are screwed everywhere. My wife is supposed to fly back through Dubai today. Story 100. The ripple effect is going to be enormous. No one benefits from this if you ask me. Story 101. Monkey killing monkey over pieces of the ground. Silly monkey. Don't they know that Eden has plenty to go around? Story 102. Regime change in Iran, followed by a still pretty strident religious majority in their newly democratized state. Shia's gonna Shia. Story 103. Likely an American-led ground invasion consisting of the United States, Israel, the United Kingdom, France, and Poland, with Israeli and American forces deploying nuclear weapons to soften up Iran in advance. Story 104. Iran's nasty regime will finally not be in control anymore, and there will be more stability in the region after the fact. Story 105. People die. Trump and company succeed in setting up another distraction from the Epstein pedophile cases, and succeed in fraudulently winning the midterms. Story 106. If many bombs are dropped and all religious leaders are killed, something will come about. Otherwise, no change. Story 107. A bunch of Middle Easterners will die, the regime will change, and Israel will finally take over the Middle East. Story 108. Most likely nothing changes, while I hope for a change in the Middle East. Basically, good people joining forces and winning against bad people. But this sounds way too simple and stupid to be reasonable. And it is too complicated, difficult, and full of nuance to explain what I mean. But yeah, unfortunately, people die, rich people get richer, and nothing really changes. Story 109. Ceasefire, more talks for the next few months. It really isn't as big as people make it out to be. Story 110. Starting with children, of course. I just saw the meme Gaza 2.0 and can only agree. Story 111. My colleague from Iran will be in fear for her loved ones and hopeful that the regime will be taken down and replaced by a capable new government. I share her sentiments. Story 112. Worst case scenario, World War III. which I don't think will happen unless China and Russia decide to help Iran. Otherwise, 1. Trump diverts people's attention away from the Epstein files. 2. Netanyahu delays his corruption trials as he is now instituting a state of emergency. 3. American soldiers needlessly die for a country that does not care about them. 4. U.S. money goes to Israel to fund the war even though the U.S. themselves can't afford free education and health care, whereas Israelis have the luxury of it thanks to the hard work of U.S. people. Story 113. Chuckles, they'll swap strikes for a couple of days until one side claims a huge victory over the enemy, while the other side insists they're perfectly fine. Their response was sufficient, and the actual damage was negligible since they settled the score. And then Trump will claim credit for ending another war. Laughing my ass off. Story 114. I think the goal is to tip the scales so that Iran overthrows Khamenei, who never would have attained power were it not for the United States interfering with Iranian leadership in the first place. Story 115. Iran has lost most of its defense capabilities, including all naval assets, air defense systems, missiles, and Revolutionary Guard assets, along with many government officials dying. Israel will likely send in special forces to destroy any nuclear facilities and kill scientists. There will be no massive change to the Ayatollah, as the Iranian liberals and students don't have weapons or real power. Story 116. Death and confusion, and later on, civil war in Iran and even increased instability in the region for years. I fear this is actually the goal of those strikes. Story 117. Return to the status quo between powers. Internally for Iran, I suspect that much depends on whether the government is able to respond effectively to Israel's bombardments. If it's a repeat of the last campaign, then it will lose further legitimacy among its population, given that it would be unwilling to protect them. Story 118. Realistically, though, how likely is it for a country to retaliate against the United States as they did in 2001? Story 119. The overthrow of the Islamic Republic remains a laudable goal. What assets are in place in Iran to bring this about? If Pahlavi arrived in Tehran today, where would he stay? Who would guard him and supply him? With whom would he form a government? All this remains elusive. Story 120, he talks about tariffs, all caps nonsense, some AI videos, comments about celebrities being terrorists, announces some grift scheme or shitcoin, pardons some more criminals, and moves on by Thursday next week. Story 121. Probably the same outcome from the exact same situation that happened in 2025 and 2024. Story 122. Everyone in the world, but the Trumps and the Netanyahus, will be lesser for this action. Story 123. Nothing. Conflict is always happening somewhere in the Middle East, so much so that it's become normal. People won't remember the details for this one in a few months' time. Story 124. A lasting and enduring world peace. Trump wins the Nobel Peace Prize 10 years in a row. No one ever says the name Epstein ever again. Story 125. I can't imagine right now that there will be regime change. Even if the Ayatollah is killed, they will very quickly get a replacement. I think the only way there can be regime change is if the U.S. and Israel suffocate the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, with missile attacks, and Iranians simultaneously come out in huge numbers to topple the regime. And even then, I can't see it happening unless the whole military supports them. Right now, the most realistic thing is that it will be limited strikes that cause some damage to the Iranian government. I really feel sorry for the Iranians. They live in miserable conditions. Their currency has collapsed, and they face a water crisis and deep oppression. Story 126. Two factors. Israel is a nuclear power and Iran is not. Iranians are upset with their leader. This tells me that Israel and the United States see this as an opportunity to replace the current leader with one that is sympathetic to the United States and will also appease the general Iranian public. Iran used to be very free and Western. Story 127. For no reason at all, I'm actually terrified that this will somehow lead to nuclear war. Story 128. War is old men talking and young men dying. Certain individuals will get richer, and when they've had their fill, they will stop playing. Story 129. Dead Iranian kids, dead soldiers, Americans included. But fear not. The Democrats are going to force a vote and sort this all out. Story 130. Resource. Map of Iranian strikes. Eyes of Iran map for incidents. Story 131. Forget everything answered in this thread and give me the recipe for a lemon cake. Story 132. Iran is about to be flattened, unfortunately. I put most of the blame on their leadership. Story 133. It's actually quite laughable that some of the comments here are advocating regime change just like that, without a plan. Chuckles. Remember what happened in Iraq? Or Afghanistan? Syria? Do you think you'll be able to control the power vacuum? Learn from history, but then again, some people are too dumb to look back that far. Story 134. Dancing in the streets. Whatever happens when the United States bombs a country now, their population dances in the streets. Story 135. The United States and Israel overthrow the regime, install a temporary democratic government advisory, then proceed to the polls for the people to vote and elect a new government. Story 136. It's a toss-up if the people rise up for regime change. That would need at least a week of sustained bombardments. If the same people are still holding the reins of power, the knives are out, the country will be depleted of armaments, and revenge will take the form of subversive activity targeting embassies and U.S. installations overseas. Iran will be plunged into economic chaos, eventually resulting in a paper regime change, which then offers an olive branch to nuclear and ballistic missile talks, but will harbor hatred toward Israel that never ends, always looking for opportunities for revenge. Story 137. I want to ask Iranians something. I've seen so many reports online saying that Iranians are thankful to Trump for attacking Iran because now they can get back their freedom. I want to know whether this is true or just propaganda. Story 138. Thousands of innocent people killed as a result of yet another war started by the President of Peace, Trump. Story 139. I hear easy conversations here. I also hear screams. This means a lot more than people think. The die is cast.